Hi, I'm Micah Clark with the American Family Association. Thank you for joining us today. If you read my Wednesday email, you know that we're promoting a voter guide. It's election time in Indiana. The primary is May 7th. Early voting begins next week. So we wanted to give you a tool today to look at, to investigate candidates at the national, federal, and state level. So with me today is a good friend, Debbie Wuthnow, with iVoterGuide.com. And we're going to talk about this new tool that's not new, a tool for you. It might be new to you. They've been around for several years. In fact, I have some interesting statistics. In 2022, iVoterGuide.com looked at 5,190 races and reached 6.8 million voters across the United States. That took them 52,000 hours of work to do that in 2022. Their goal this year is even more races. So I'm so happy to have Debbie with us today to help us explain iVoterGuide, what it is, how you can use it, and share it with your family and friends and church members as well. So Debbie, thank you for joining us today.
It's a pleasure to be here, Micah. Thanks for having me.
Well, tell us about iVoterGuide. What is it? What's its purpose?
Well, iVoterGuide, we're a Christian ministry. In fact, we're a part of American Family Association. We're under the AFA Action umbrella, but we began outside of that, and just by a bunch of Christians who had the realization that the people that we elect to office have a lot of sway and a lot of pull over us, and if we want our values, our biblical values, to be represented by the laws and what goes on in the state and the nation, we need to elect people who share our values. So there's a lack of information out there about candidates. So the founders started researching the candidates on the ballot with the philosophy that it's more important to look at what they've done than to look at what they say they're going to do. So he began researching actions and votes and things like that from those elected officials. So iVoterGuide, that's what we do. We dig for data on candidates. We gather their campaign finance data so we know who's given money to them, as well as who they have as an individual have supported, because what they do with their pocketbook is pretty revealing. As you know, we gather scorecards on every candidate because the best evidence of how they're going to vote if you elect them is how they voted if they've previously held office. So candidates running for Congress, if they've been served in the state legislature in Indiana, we will get those scorecards from a variety of organizations, both on the left and the right, because either side, that information is valuable. I will frequently say, a bad scorecard from Planned Parenthood tells me just as much as a good scorecard from National Right to Life. So then we add to that endorsement. Go ahead. No, go ahead.
No, go ahead. No, you're doing well. Go ahead.
Okay, so data points. So we have campaign finance, we have scorecards, and then we gather endorsements, which are kind of like somebody's list of, I've checked out these candidates, this is my favorite in a race. So we have over 7,000 endorsers in our system, and then every candidate gets the chance to answer our issue survey, which you're very familiar with. We have about 35 questions on a broad spectrum of issues, from religious liberty, right to life, down to your values and what are your priorities if you get elected to office. And on top of all that research, then we have an army of volunteers who rate every candidate. So you don't just have the data, you don't just have the voter guides of old with here's 5 issues and they support or oppose these issues. It's an evaluation that we show it on a gas gauge. It ranges from verified liberal to verified conservative to give you kind of an easy snapshot of how this candidate's political philosophy, I will say, flavored with their biblical worldview of how they fall onto that spectrum. But you can look at all the data for yourself. So that's a high level of what we do.
I would encourage people to look at all the data because there's a lot, as Debbie mentioned. But maybe one of the first things people will see, and sometimes I get asked about more than anything else, is the meter. So tell us the categories, and maybe briefly, I know you're, as an overview panelist, it's very lengthy in what that means. But give us a brief description of what each of those categories would typically mean for a candidate.
Well, the main categories range from verified liberal to verified conservative. And a verified rating on either end of the spectrum, we require a candidate to have all, like a verified conservative would be all conservative data points. All of their issues fall in the conservative spectrum. And the verified label means that they have proof that they verified that they will stand behind that position and they will vote on it, or they've taken a very public stance. So we need evidence of that, not just talk. So if somebody's a brand new candidate, never held office before, they're really going to be it's going to be hard to earn that verified label. But then we have a conservative rating, which means we've got pretty much everything falls in the conservative spectrum on their issues. And there's a broad spectrum of issues, and sometimes things are a little questionable, which is why we spend so much time digging for that information. Then we have 3 ratings that I would say fall into the candidates that have mixed data points. We have a leans conservative, a moderate, and a leans liberal. And all 3 of those ratings, we would see some positions on the candidate that are conservative and some that are liberal. Some might be conservative socially, but liberal in economics or spending or something like that. But if there's a mixed bag of data, then we look at, is it more conservative than liberal? Is it more liberal than conservative? Or is it pretty much split both ways? And those candidates fall into one of those leans or moderate rating. And then, goes other way as far as a liberal rating or verified liberal needs to be proof that they stand behind liberal policies. The other ratings that we have is a far left rating, and we added that rating in 2022 because the left had gone far beyond what we were feeling like fit on our spectrum. So that's candidates who stand for Marxism, who stand for socialism, who stand for open borders, government paying for everything. We do have a presidential candidate that earned the far left rating. So we do use it, sadly, more than I wish we would use it. And then we have one other rating called unclassifiable for candidates who, it's just kind of a warning. They may have conservative positions, they may have liberal positions, they have a mix, but there's just something about this candidate that we don't necessarily recommend giving them power in it for elected office.
Now, another question I get from people, and I've already gotten it since sending this out, is, well, there's candidate Smith, we'll say Joe Smith, and he's rated conservative or he's rated liberal, but he didn't answer his survey. And I think that confuses some people, but it's because it's more than just the survey. Can you address that as to that type of candidate? Because there's quite a few who may have only answered 1 or 2 questions or none on the survey, and yet they still have a rating. How does that, explain that to people who might see that?
Well, the questionnaire is just one of the data points that I described earlier. So we have scorecards, we have campaign finance data, we have endorsements, we have questionnaire, we have other information that we might find on candidates. It could be a recording of a candidate forum they've spoken at. It could be a news article written about them. Anything that we can find, we try to aggregate that intelligence. We also look at their website. We also look at their social media. Anything that we can dig for and find on a candidate. So while we would love to have every candidate answer the questionnaire, it is one of the things that is rhetoric. It's talk and less actions. We'd rather see the actions. Did they attend a March for Life? Did they attend a BLM rally? Those are data points that are actions, same as campaign finance. They may have given donations to people. So the questionnaire is, I love to read the answers, but we're able to, in most cases, assign a rating even if they don't answer the questionnaire because of the other research. As you said, the 52,000 hours, that averages out to 4 hours for each candidate. So know that, even if you don't see data there, that doesn't mean we didn't look. We are always looking. Sometimes some candidates just don't provide the information internet publicly available as much as we would like.
Well, I know of a candidate, of course I won't name this candidate, but it was a good example of this. We were reviewing some of the ratings, and one of the candidates I think have scored kind of leans conservative, but we found news articles where he said, I'm a moderate, and he was weak on the right to life and weak on Second Amendment. So, we'll take them at their word. If they say they're moderate, we're not going to rate them as conservative because it was in the newspaper. In answer to a question, he said, I'm a moderate. So that was the rating he earned upon review. Do things like that happen?
Oh, that happens for sure. We also get candidates, and part of why we look at actions more than rhetoric is we'll have candidates give us conservative answers on the survey. But yet we find they voted for, some liberal legislation. They voted for, expanding taxes or, other things like that. And then, so they'll get maybe a leans conservative rating, whereas they're telling everybody they're a conservative candidate, but their actions have proved otherwise. We've even had a candidate who, wasn't happy that he was rated leans conservative. And we said, he's like, I told you everything you wanted to hear. I said, but your actions didn't line
Right.
up with your rhetoric. So that's why we do the digging and why the questionnaire isn't as essential.
Now, I want to mention that in Indiana, I get a lot of people ask about delegate races or school board races, and there's thousands of candidates running for delegates. There's not enough manpower for any group, left or right, doing a voter guide to cover all those. But in Indiana, we cover state representative, state senator, U.S. Congress, U.S. Senate, governor, and I think the presidential ratings are on there now for the primary as well in Indiana. So
They are.
Now, I don't want to get the cart in front of the horse, but I've had some questions about this too. And I think it's people maybe don't understand the system, but how will iVoterGuide change in the fall? Because there will be some differences there. Some people are saying, well, where's the Libertarian candidate? Well, the Libertarian candidate's nominated by convention. They don't have primary opponents, so they're not listed right now. But in the fall, we might see it. How will it look differently in the fall, I guess is my question.
Oh, excellent question. So we cover the Republican primary in states that have primaries because that primary, that party platform aligns more with our biblical values. And it's a bandwidth issue for the reason we don't cover the Democratic primary. But in the general election, we will cover every candidate that's in a race that's contested. And so that will include Libertarian candidates, Green Party candidates, nonpartisan candidates. It all depends on the state and the race. So it will look very different in November, and you'll see a lot more candidates in the races. We cover, as the levels that you all listed in Indiana, we potentially will cover some school board candidate races in Indiana. We're currently evaluating that. It takes a lot more time to research school board candidates than it does even state legislative candidates. So we spend a lot of time trying to make sure we can make the best impact and to spend that time in areas where we've got good candidates running. We're working with great organizations. And as we've been talking with you, Micah, in Indiana about a couple of Indiana races we might cover for school board.
Okay. Well, I want to tell people too before we go, just to make clear, and I'll repeat this a couple times, AFA of Indiana does not endorse candidates, and I would encourage you, if you see a voter guide from a group you don't agree with, whether it be maybe Planned Parenthood, Sierra Club, or some group on the left or Democrat, even Democrat, Republican Party things, I would encourage you to look at all of those. This is just one tool we're offering because it's one of the only ones I know of that's covering Indiana in this way. I feel like it's, for our supporters, it's very helpful. But the nice thing about iVoterGuide is it includes some of those as well. But you can find things on this for a particular candidate, and maybe they have a score from a group, that maybe you've not heard of. Well, I encourage you to Google them and look at their voter guide too, because it's very helpful to know how candidates answer surveys on left, right, whatever. Maybe it's just a business group. That's a good thing to look at too. But Debbie, I know this is also, we've got the May 7th primary in Indiana. I've also told people, hey, if you like iVoterGuide, it's not just Indiana. If you have family in other states and they have a primary coming up, or even in the fall, a lot of times I'll have people say, hey, my son lives in Georgia. Is this down there? And I'll say, yes, look at iVoterGuide wherever you are. So I don't know if you're in all 50 states yet, but I know you're in close to 40. How many states are you in right now?
Well, we cover federal races in all 50 states, so
Okay.
You will find at least your congressional or Senate candidates and the president at iVoterGuide.com if you enter your address. And we designed this to be easy to use, so you don't have to know what districts you live in. You go to iVoterGuide.com at the homepage, you enter your voting address, whatever state you're in, and we'll show you the races and candidates that we cover. So federal candidates in all 50 states. There are 37 states where we're covering the statewide races. So the governor, the lieutenant governor, the attorney general, if you have a state board of education, if you have a state Supreme Court even, we are covering judicial races at the statewide level in 37 states, or the ones that are on the ballot. There are 32 states where we are covering the state legislatures that are on the ballot. And if you can go to our homepage and scroll down and you'll see a map that'll give you a legend of the coverage we've got in your state. You can click on that state to see voter guides that are coming up in that state. You can see previous ones we've covered that you can see the results on, and then even ones we're just beginning to work on, because primary season, it has begun. It's coming up in Indiana soon, but it's going to run all the way through August and September before we get ready for the November general election. So we're looking at probably over 13,000 candidates that we'll be evaluating in all 50 states.
Well, something I want to say to our audience too, if you go to iVoterGuide and you say, oh, I know where my state senator is. In Indiana, every House member is up every 2 years, but the Senate, there's 50 Senate members in Indiana, they're staggered. So every other election with a 4-year term, every 2 years. So if you're looking for your state senator and they're not on there, they're probably not up for election, because only 25 of the 50 are up for election this year. So just keep that in mind. It doesn't mean we missed them. It means that they're probably not on the ballot this time. So I've had a couple of people say, well, where's my state senator? Well, you're probably in a district where he's not up this year, but up in 2 years from now. But every House member is up every 2 years, as every congressional district. So, and we have a U.S. Senate race as well. And the governor's race has multiple candidates. I want you to look at those as well. But Debbie, I want to thank you for joining us today. Is there anything you'd like to close with? Anything I missed maybe that people need to know when they go to iVoterGuide.com?
Well, I would encourage them to sign up for our email list, because then we'll let you know when we've got voter guides released for your area. We also send educational emails about once a week. We're sending ones, this week was about, what does campaign finance data tell you about a candidate? What can you learn about from their giving patterns? We've talked about, what does the Bible say about immigration? It's just once a week. It's great educational, and you can share it with your friends and a family around the nation. It helps educate them, but it also lets them know about iVoterGuide. We also have resources on our Take Action page. If you want to become one of those evaluators that help us assign that gauge, if you have spare time on your hands, it's only about 10 to 15 hours around every election. You can apply to be a panelist. We have church bulletin flyers. We've got handouts you can give your pastor about what they can do with regards to elections. You can find your polling place. You can register to vote. iVoterGuide really seeks to be your one-stop election resource. Go there first. But as Micah said, there are other resources out there. We don't endorse either, Micah. We just give you tools to decide for yourself. So check out iVoterGuide.com. Share it with your family and your friends.
Well, one thing I can't remember I've looked at so much on iVoterGuide. I don't remember if there's sample ballots on iVoterGuide, but if there's not, your local county clerk's office, the Secretary of State's office, you can pull up and see who's on your ballot, which is a good thing to do before you go to iVoterGuide. Go to your county clerk's office online with your county or the Secretary of State, and you can get a sample ballot on where you live, and then you'll say, oh, I'm voting for not my state senator, but this state rep or this person. So you'll know, and that's okay, so my district is this. Where do I go to iVoterGuide to find my district? Now, iVoterGuide will actually do that for you when you're in your address, but it's not bad to have your ballot and your voter guide and see how the two overlap, so you're looking at the right races and candidates. Now, I look all over the state because I know a lot of these people running, and you can do that too. But I would encourage you, if you know somebody who lives in Fort Wayne and you live in Indianapolis, tell them about iVoterGuide, because it covers the whole state. And so, well, Debbie, thank you for joining us. Appreciate the work you do. I know you're very busy. You're working in Indiana and other states. Thank you for the work you're doing to educate voters so they can cast an informed ballot this May 7th.
It's a pleasure, and thank you for having me on.
Yeah. Well, again, I'm Micah Clark with American Family Association. Hope this video was helpful. Please go to iVoterGuide.com, Google iVoterGuide or iVoterGuide.com. Enter your address. You'll find out your candidates that are rated and surveyed. Read the information about them, see who they've donated to, who's donated to them, what endorsements they have. And I hope that's helpful. And again, thank you for joining us today. Hope you have a wonderful weekend, and thank you for your support of American Family Association of Indiana.